Today we're going to learn about rounding numbers, and so we're going to look at our vocabulary here. Our first vocabulary word is estimate. Estimate is a number close to an exact amount. In order to get an estimate, we take what we know about math to form that estimate. So another word I like to call it is an educated guess. A round is to replace a number with another number that tells about how many or how much something is. So it's not the exact number, but it's about or close to that number. On our first example here, we have round to the nearest place value of the underlined digit. As you can see, we have digits here. Digits form a number. Each single number in a larger number is considered a digit. So here we have the digit 9 in the ones place, the digit 0 in the tens place, and the digit 5 in the hundreds place, which forms the number 509. So we're going to be rounding to the place value of the underlined digit. So if we look here, this is the place value of the underlined digit here would be in the tens place because we have our ones, tens, hundreds. Over here on 67,490, we have our ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s. Because thousands place is underlined, that would be what we're rounding to, the nearest thousand. On our last one over here, we have our ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. Because the 100,000s digit is underlined, we'd be rounding to the nearest 100,000. Now when we round, I like to use a poem. It kind of helps me remember exactly what I'm doing. So our poem can be found right over here. We find the number, look right next door. 4 or less, you just ignore. 5 or more, add 1 more. So when we're rounding, if our number is less than 4, we're going to ignore it and just bring down our number. If it's more than 4, we add 1 more. And we're always looking to the right. So here we go. We're going to start off with 509 up here. And once again, we're rounding to the nearest 10 because our tens place, our digit in our tens place is underlined. So we're going to find our number. And when we find our number, as the poem states, it would be the digit in which is underlined. So we find our number and we have a 0. 0, we look right next door. To the right, when we look to the right, here, we have a 9. So we're looking right next door at the 9. If it's 4 or less, we ignore. If it's 5 or more, we add 1 more. As we can see, 9 is more than 5, so we're going to add 1 more. So we're going to add 1 to our 0 there. So 0 plus 1 is 1. We're going to drop down our 1. Anything to the right then turns into a 0. And anything to the left we drop straight down. So our 5 drops straight down. Nope. So we get 510. So 509 rounded to the nearest 10 is going to be 510. On our next one here, we look over here, we have 67,490. Our number is the 7 here because it's in the thousands place. So we're going to round to the nearest thousand. So we're going to find our number, which is in the 7, the thousands place. We're going to look right next door. If it's 4 or less, which we do have a 4 here, so it is 4 or less, we just ignore. So by ignoring, what it means is we bring down our 7. Our 7 comes straight down. Anything to the right of the 7 turns into zeros. And then we just bring down whatever's to the left of the 7. So in this case, we're bringing down our 6. And so our answer here would be 67,000, rounded to the nearest thousand. So 67,490 rounded to the nearest thousand is 67,000. On our next one here, we have 457,245. And this time we're going to round to the nearest 100,000. So we're going to find our number. We're going to look right next door. If it's 4 or less, here we have a 5, so it's not 4 or less. Then we would have ignored. We're going to move on. It's 5 or more, we add one more. So in this case, we're going to add one more. We're going to add 1 to our 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. And then anything to the right of our number comes in as zeros. So 0, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. We get 500,000. 457,245 rounded to the nearest 100,000 is 500,000. On this example, we're going to find an estimate using a number line. So we're going to round 5,378 to the nearest 100. Now, as you can see on this number line, we have 5,378 already filled in on this number line. When we're rounding to the nearest 100, we're on our number line. If we look at it, we have 5,200, 5,300, 5,400, 5,500, and 5,600. When we place our number on the number line, we can see which one it would be closest to. So in this case, we're counting by hundreds here, moving up by hundreds. And so we can see that 5,378 is actually closest to 5,400. So our answer here would be 5,400. On our second one down here, it says round 5,378 to the nearest 1,000. So in this case, we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. On our number line up here, it's all the 5,000 there. So we're not going to worry about the number line here, but we're going to round 5,378 to the nearest 1,000. So we can do that by following our poem. We find our number, and in this case, we're going to the nearest 1,000. So I'm going to underline our thousands place. We're going to look right next door. If we look right next door, we have a 3. If it's 4 or less, we just ignore. Because 3 is less than 4, we're going to ignore, which means we're just going to drop down our 5. And then everything to the right of our 5 becomes zeros. So 1, 2, 3 zeros, we get 5,000. So 5,378 rounded to the nearest 1,000 is 5,000. Just for a little bit of added practice here, we have a few others. And so as you can see, in this case, they're not underlined. They tell us which place value they would like us to round to. So we're going to go ahead and round to the place values in which are stated, still following our poem. So on our first one, we have 100,000. We have 124,452 to the nearest 100,000. So we need to make sure that we know where our 100,000's place is. If we're not sure, we can always go from the far right and count over. We have our ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, and 100,000s. So because I found my 100,000s, I'm going to go ahead and put my line underneath my 100,000. And so I have my number. I look right next door. If it's 4 or less, 2 is less than 4, so it is 4 or less, I just ignore. So I'm going to bring down my 1, and then everything to the right of my number becomes zeros. So we're going to fill in my zeros. 0, 0, 0. And so we have 124,452 rounded to the nearest 100,000 is 100,000. Over here we have our 10,000. It asks us to round to the nearest 10,000. So once again I need to find my 10,000s. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to find my 10,000 spot. Now I know that the 6 is in the 10,000s place, so I'm going to underline it there. So I have my 6. I found my number. I look right next door. I have an 8. If it's 4 or less, we ignore. If it's 5 or more, an 8 is more than 5. Because an 8 is more than 5, we're going to add 1 more. So we're going to add 1 to the 6. And 6 plus 1 is 7. So we're going to bring down our 7. Everything to the right then becomes 0. So we're going to take it as 0 for that 8, 0 for the hundreds place, tens place, and ones place. And then we have to make sure that we bring down our 5, which is left of our number. We're going to bring down our 5. So our answer then becomes 570,000. So 568,831 rounded to the nearest 10,000 is 570,000. On our next one, down here, we have 649 rounded to the nearest 10. So once again, we need to make sure we know where our tens is. So we have ones, tens. So then we're going to move over. We're going to underline our digit there. And we're going to look right next door. Find your number, look right next door. If it's 4 or less, you ignore. If it's 5 or more, we add 1 more. Because 9 is more than 5, we're going to add 1 to our 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. Anything to the right becomes a 0. And we bring down the digits to the left. So we have a 650. 649 rounded to the nearest 10 is 650. Now we go to our 100. Over here, we're going to look at our hundreds. Here we have 23,537 rounded to the nearest 100. So once again, I'm going to find my digit, or find my place. Right now it's my 5 there is in my hundreds place. I'm going to look right next door. I have a 3 next door. If it's 4 or less, we ignore. 3 is less than 4, so we're going to ignore, and we're going to bring down our 5. Now, once I've brought down my 5, anything to the right becomes 0, so I'm going to take the 3 is going to become a 0, the 7 is going to become a 0, and then anything to the left we need to bring down. So we're going to bring down the 3 and the 2, and so we get 23,500. 23,537 rounded to the nearest 100 is 23,500. On our very last one is a little tricky, and it's kind of designed to trick you a little bit. Here we have 468 rounded to the nearest 1,000. Now, if we count over here, we have ones, tens, hundreds. Oh, we don't have a digit in the thousands place, but that does not mean that the thousands place is not there. So what we have to do here is we can actually add a 0 in our thousands place, and then underline our thousands place. So now we know that we're looking at our thousands place here, and we look right next door. If it's 4 or less, we ignore. If it's 5 or more, we add 1 more. So in this case, because it's a 4, we're going to ignore, and we're going to bring down our 0. Now, because we brought down 0, and 0 would be the same as 0,000, 0, 100, 0 is 0 all around, our answer is just completely 0. Now, had this been written differently, and had we had a 400 or a 500, 568. Then our number, when we rounded it up to 100 or to 1,000, we'd put in our 0 and underline it. If we had rounded that to our 1,000, that would then be we would then round up because 5 is more. We'd add 1 to the 0, and we would round it up to 1,000. But that's an exception. That's just to show you that because this is F4 here, we have to round down. Because we're rounding down, it rounds down to 0. Even if the number's not there, so like in this case, we did not have a number in the thousands, we still have to round to the thousands position to get our 0. Over here, on 568, just to show you, I have 568 rounded the nearest 1,000. We then have 1,000 because we'd have 5 is more than 4, or 5 or more. We add 1 more. We'd add 1 to the 0, which would give us 1,000. And that is how we round numbers and find estimates.